to learn a little bit about mole crickets and then how we control them here at Vine Dresser Lawn and Landscape. All right. To start it off, over the past several years, mole crickets have become number one insect pest of home lawns. There are two species are present as pests along the southern coast: the tawny mole cricket and the southern mole cricket. And this is the southern mole cricket, and then this is the tawny mole cricket here. The tawny mole cricket is the most destructive species of mole cricket since it feeds almost exclusively on the roots and shoots of grass. The southern mole cricket may feed a little on the roots, but are primarily predators, and they feed on small creatures that live in the soil. Understanding the life cycle of the mole cricket is going to really help control the mole cricket. In general, the life cycles of the different species are similar. For control purposes, this PDF is really focused on the tawny mole cricket because that's the one that does the most damage. Mole crickets have three basic development stages: the egg, the nymph, and the adult stage. Overwintering takes place as either large nymphs or adults that can remain somewhat active throughout the winter. Winter damage is seen as short tunnel mounds. So they're not primarily feeding, but they're moving around. As the soil temperatures rise in March and April, the crickets do more tunneling. Crickets that overwinter as nymphs finish their development into adults during the spring. So they start off as babies in the winter, and then in the spring they're going to become adults. In late March and early April, the adults begin to fly and mate. The adult males locate preferred sites to lay eggs and dig a small tunnel with an opening exposed on the surface. The male produces blah, blah, blah. Shortly after mating, egg laying occurs, the end of April or early May. Mated females dig down 3 to 10 inches of soil and lay a cluster of 35 eggs in a small chamber. Females usually construct 3 to 5 chambers and lay a total of 100 to 150 eggs. The round translucent white eggs hatch between May and July. Egg hatch requires about 20 days. The southern mole cricket may continue to lay eggs throughout the summer and hatch and can occur in August and September. Newly hatched immature nymphs are small, usually about a quarter inch in length. As they grow, the nymph stage goes to 6 to 8 molts, similar to a snake shedding its skin. Similar nymphs. Moving on down. Okay, they continue. All right, so small nymphs have no wings, but larger nymphs have small wings. They continue to feed and grow through the summer. So here's where the damage really occurs: is they lay the eggs in the spring, they hatch around May to July, then the babies are going to wake up and they're going to start to feed. They continue to feed through the summer, and these insects are most destructive in late August through early October. Individual tunnels may exceed 10 feet in length. Mole cricket activity is regulated by temperature and soil moisture in ways that are not well understood. However, the most feeding does occur at night, especially after rain or irrigation. During July and early August, the grass is often growing aggressively and nymphs are too small to produce noticeable damage, but by October, the nymphs reach the adult stage. So they're born, May to July. They start that feeding. You're not going to really notice damage until by October the nymphs reach the adult stage. However, few will overwinter. So by August, September, October time frame, you're going to notice the damage at the end of the season. During cold weather, the crickets may stay deep in the soil. However, prior to cold front, active tunneling near the surface may increase for a short time. General control procedures. To the extent at which mole crickets need to be controlled is based on the turf use and your tolerance to damage. Therefore, it's appropriate to divide the turf into 4 distinct groups: golf courses, home lawns, and we're going to focus on home lawns. First, it's critical to determine those areas most. All right, so basically this goes on to basically they're showing you how to map the damage. So when past damage has been serious, this is often quite easy. The best approach is to use a concept referred to as mapping. This approach is basically a visual record of mole cricket activity. So they're saying monitor the activity, find out where the most damage is, and that's where you want to apply most of your insecticides. And it tells you start in the winter, spring, and then, to map throughout the summer. It's a good part right here. All right. As the temperatures warm up in the spring, activity increases. Record those areas that seem to be worse. If damage becomes apparent, then treatment may be required. Spring treatment is not recommended, but some population reduction is possible. Unless the area is very isolated, spring treatments will only have a slight impact on reducing the number of adults that come into the area to lay eggs. Damage is usually minimal after the middle of May. After egg laying is finished, the damage from the adults rapidly diminishes. Since the majority of the nymphs hatch in June and July, there will usually not be any visible mole cricket damage. This is the time when that's to check for in July. And it goes on to tell you a soapy water test to flush out the effective tool to monitor cricket edge hatch and abundance of turf. When soil temperature drop in the fall, crickets will grow. The soap drench becomes less effective and decreases. All right, so in the summer, spring and summer, you're going to see good soapy water tests. In the fall, the temperatures drop in the fall, the crickets grow. The soap drench becomes less effective and decreases in effectiveness into the spring. So it's hard to flush them out in the summer and in the fall and winter, and then early spring, it's easy to flush them back out. If the soil is dry, the second drench with pure water. First, the crickets are not treated until the majority of the eggs. All right, treating. We'll finally get to it. Flush counts is high. When mole crickets approach a half inch, it's time to begin the main summer treatment. So you can treat in the spring, but you're not going to really get that much effectiveness on an adult mole cricket. When mole crickets approach a half inch, it's time to begin main summer treatment. Treating after most of the eggs have hatched, but before the earliest hatching crickets are longer than half inch, 3 goals are accomplished. Treating after most of the eggs have hatched, but before the earliest hatching crickets are longer than a half inch, 3 goals are accomplished. First, the crickets are treated until the majority of eggs have been hatched. This provides control for most of the crickets. Second, the insecticide residual activity will kill off the remaining crickets yet to hatch. And finally, timely application provides control prior to the appearance of noticeable turf damage. Here's what it says. Last week of June. So around June, you want to have it down. When mole crickets approach a half inch, it's time to begin the main summer treatment. Treating after most of the eggs have hatched, but before the or longer than a half inch goals are accomplished. That's why we suggest in June to put a loft CG down by June. The three main goals. First, crickets are going to be treated until the majority of the eggs have hatched, and this provides control for most crickets. Second, the insecticide residual activity will kill off the remaining crickets that haven't hatched yet. And finally, timely applications provide control prior to appearance of notable turf damage. In nearly all situations, treatments in midsummer is the most effective time to apply insecticide. The crickets are small, susceptible to insecticides, and the soil temperature is warm and conducive to good pesticide efficacy. Historically, turf was often not treated at this time because the mole crickets went unnoticed and damage became severe in August and September. The optimal time for midsummer treatment will usually be from June 24th to July 10th in North Carolina, except if the soil is very dry. So that's why we say get it down by June. No one treatment will be 100% effective. Our trials have shown great variability in how well a treatment works from one location to another and from one year to another. Mole cricket behavior is influenced by its surroundings and weather, soil moisture, and other factors that change consistently, i.e. being surroundings and weather, soil moisture, and other factors that can change consistently. It warmed up extremely early this year. I haven't looked lately, but at one point in time, we were 5 weeks ahead of spring, which means pest activity is going to be 5 weeks ahead. These factors influence the actions of mole crickets and effectiveness of insecticide. Rarely do we see the same treatment response twice in a row. So you got to put one product down, and then several months later, you got to put another product down. Consequently, treated areas may need retreatment in August and September, especially if initial populations were very high. Each subsequent treatment will be somewhat less effective as the crickets are larger. Additional treatments may sometimes be needed in October or November in heavily infested areas. Treatments applied in December, January, and February provide variable but generally poor control since the mole cricket's activity widely fluctuates with weather. So December, January, February, bad time to treat for mole crickets. Make sure the soil is moist prior to application of any insecticide treatment. All right, so what we would do, we would come in and cut your irrigation on, run it for 5 minutes to bring the mole crickets to the top. It's important to follow these guidelines because do not overwater as cause runoff or puddling. Any treatments late in the day since the crickets are active that evening. All right, so 2 types, the southern, the tawny. They're going to mate in early spring. They're going to hatch and start feeding from May to July. And so we want to target treatment in June. The optimal time for midsummer treatment will usually be June 24th to July. Now, obviously, we couldn't treat everybody on June 24th, so we want to put down an insecticide starting in June. Now, here's three insecticides we can use. Top choice. Now, top choice is primarily, it contains fipronil. That's the active ingredient, and it's primarily to control fire ants. But top choice, if you get it down May, June timeframe, it's going to give you 4 months of mole cricket control. And that's up to approximate length of control, 4 months. So it's going to kill off mole crickets, and then as they start to hatch, May, June, July timeframe, top choice is working. Second, aloft, we put this down in about June, and this is for contact and systemic insect pest control in lawns and ornamental landscapes. So contact's going to kill them. Contact systemic means the plant's going to take it in by the root, and as the mole cricket eats it, it'll die as well. And this got clethodim and bifenthrin as the main ingredients. I'm going to assume this is the contact control. This is the systematic control. And so top choice, Aloft is going to give you, if I can find it here. Can't find it. Anyway, Aloft will give you 3 months of control. So it's going to knock down and then systemic control for up to 3 months. Mole crickets applied during peak adult flight and egg lay. If the soil is dry, irrigate before application to stimulate insect activity, and water application to release the insecticide from the granule carrier. So basically, we're going to cut the irrigation on, run the water for 5 minutes in the area, in the areas that need to be treated, and then we will treat the area and then cut the irrigation back on. So running the water is going to bring the mole crickets to the top, put the treatment down, and then run the water again, and that will release insecticide from the granule carrier. And the last product we could use is, or that we use, there's tons of products you can use, cross-check. And this is strictly bifenthrin. So whereas this has contact and systemic pest control, this is just contact. So basically we would come in, water the lawn, bring the mole crickets to the top, spray it with cross-check, and it's just going to kill off what mole crickets that it comes in contact with. Mole crickets. All right. So this is what cross-check says. All right, grass areas that received intense adult mole cricket pressure in the spring should be treated immediately prior to peak egg hatch. Optimal control is achieved at this time because young nymphs are more susceptible to insecticides and they are located near the soil surface where the insecticide is most concentrated. Control of larger, more damaging nymphs later in the year may require both higher application rates and more frequent applications to maintain acceptable control. So whereas Aloft G and top choice, we can only treat it one time. With cross-check, we can treat it several times. So control of larger, more damaging nymphs later in the year may require both higher application rates and more frequent applications to maintain acceptable control. Application should be made as late in the day as possible and should be watered in, same as the others, to bring mole crickets. All right, if the soil is not moist, then it is important to irrigate before application to bring the mole crickets closer to the soil surface where the contact and insecticide would be maximum. This is for adults. Achieving acceptable control of adult mole crickets is difficult because preferred grass areas are subject to continuous invasion during the early spring by this extremely active stage. Application should be made as late in the day as possible and should be watered in. If the soil is not moist, then it is important to irrigate before application to bring the mole crickets closer to the soil and surface where the contact with insecticide will be maximized. Grass areas that receive pressure from adult mole crickets should be treated at peak egg hatch to ensure optimum control of subsequent nymphs. All right, so achieving acceptable control of adult mole crickets is difficult because preferred grass areas are subject to continuous invasion during the early spring by this extremely active stage. Basically, saying it's hard to control adults, and the key is to attack the nymphs or the babies or the immature mole crickets, and you're going to do that best between June and July. I hope this kind of gives you an understanding of mole crickets and the three products that we're going to use to attack mole crickets. Cross-check, we can spray multiple times. A loft is going to give you up to 120 days of control. You're going to put this down in June, beginning of June, at least by the end of June, early July time frame. Top choice, this is going to give you control for 4 months. So like what I would suggest is I would get top choice treatment in April, May time frame. That you put it down in April, it's going to knock out fire ants that just start coming, and it's going to give you fire ant control for a full year. And you're going to get April, May, June, July for mole crickets. And then we come back and we put down Aloft G, which is going to give you 120 days of control for chinch bugs and mole crickets. And you put that down in June, so you get June, July, August, the 3 hottest months control. Maybe even hold this off to July, but I'd get it down by June, July time frame. And then that gives you through August, and that means September, October is the only months that you would really need to monitor. And if we had to come back, we could spray cross-check in the areas September, October time frame, and should be knocked out. And then next year you would come back with top choice, April, May time frame, Aloft, June, July time frame. And the real goal is to knock out the nymphs. So you're knocking out all the babies, and once you knock out the babies, obviously you're going to have a less population the next year, and then the years after. So a little long-winded video. This is a video on mole crickets. If we can help you out in any way, just get in touch with us. And thank you for listening.